Welcome to the next video in the series of calculating commission in a complex environment. In this video, we're going to be looking at how we calculate sales performance specifically. And we're pulling that out as a component of calculating sales commissions as a whole. And this is one where it's easy to look at and kind of feel like it's pulling out a very thin slice of functionality from the overall process of calculation, but it's quite a valuable step to break out. And so what we're talking about here is we need to decide what qualifies for commission. Now we could refer to this in some other way other than sales performance. It's what I refer to it as. It may be different in your organization. But we need to decide what is in scope for a calculation of commission. And implicitly, we need to calculate what's out of scope. And that can change over time. And as we saw with things like sales levers and allocations, each of those things can have their own life cycle and they can have their own scope, which changes over time. And so splitting that out from the core part of calculating sales commissions means that we can break the problem down further, deal with a smaller chunk of functionality in a single hit, and also create something that can adapt and can change as the organization does without having to pull everything apart and put it back. So a typical approach to calculating sales commissions as a whole, really, but in particular sales performance, is to bundle the calculation of commissions with all of the conditions and all of the logic that describes what's in scope. And what ends up happening there is if the commission structure changes, independently of deciding whether something is in scope or out of scope, what we end up having to do is change the logic for all of it. You know, if we may go through, in some cases, quite a complex set of filters and logical deductions about whether a particular sale is in scope for commissions or not. And we can, we'll probably go through a lot of testing and we'll probably want to be fairly rigorous on that because this can go quite badly wrong. Either we'll end up not paying salespeople when we should be paying them. Now, the good thing about that is salespeople will be very, very quick to tell you that they've not been paid when they should have been. But the other side of that is if we're selecting too many things to pay them on, if we're overpaying them and, casting aspersions on any salespeople, but they might be less quick to report back that they've been overpaid commission on certain sales. So it's really important that that aspect of calculating sales performance is treated and tested in its own right. Because if we change a commission structure or even just change a particular parameter of commission, we don't want to have to go through the whole process, ideally, of retesting that we are identifying items to pay commission on accurately. So they tend to be bundled together and all of that logic tends to live in a single bundle. And it's fairly common to see that, but there is a better way. So the alternative is that we forget about commission entirely in the scope of sales performance. In terms of we're not interested in what the commission is that we're paying. We're not interested in calculating any percentages or anything like that of any bit of revenue that's come in to the organization, any sale that's come in. We're not interested at this stage in what that percentage will be. We're not interested in whether it's split between teams, between individuals, whether there's clawback, whether any of that kind of thing. All we're interested in doing is determining this payment that has been received or been committed to, should it be in scope for attracting commission, yes or no? And if there are subdivisions of that, if we're saying, well, yes, it should be in scope for commission, but it should only be within this subset of commission, then again, this is the place that we would do that. So an example would be, we might have new business. So new business going out to white space, as it's sometimes referred to, but a new product sold to a customer that's never engaged with our organization before or hasn't engaged with our organization in however many months, 18 months, 24 months, 6 months, whatever that appropriate range might be. We might then also have new business, existing customer. We might have an upsell. We might have a renewal. We might also have a downsell. So each of those things, they could attract commission, or they could attract some treatment in commission. There might be some percentage that's calculated on those values. So what we're trying to do here is establish, well, which of those are commissions paid on. In some organizations, it might just be it's only ever on new business. That's it. We don't pay commission on renewals. We don't pay commission on upsell or downsell. In other organizations, it can be different. So immediately we can see that there's quite a lot of logic here, albeit it might be quite simple, but there's quite a bit of logic here to decide at that highest level whether something is in scope or not. And as I say, one of those things might be deciding whether something is new business white space, new business existing customer, whether it's an upsell or not. So if we've decided what's in scope for commission, what we can then start to do, the next stage of this, is to start looking up what the commission structures are that this piece of revenue, this sale, should be attached to. And you could quite easily argue, well, why don't you just decide what the commission structure is at the point that you're deciding whether it's in scope or not? And you could easily do that. My personal preference is to split those two things apart. So we've got something that decides that it's in scope, and then something that decides what the structure is. And when I talk about a commission structure, really what I'm talking about is, a table, a commission schedule, for example, that in the most simple form, you might say all new business secured by all teams across the entire organization uses the master commission schedule. And it might be that it says for sales of up to £1,000, commission is paid at 1%, and then for sales up to £5,000, it's paid at another percentage, and 10,000, and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm talking about, the commission schedule. And there's a distinction there. There's an important distinction to make, which is to say that still at this stage, we are not interested in which of those percentages we're going to pay or calculate. What we're interested in is that this is the commission schedule that we should be looking at. So all we're doing is just, so we could look at it as almost being kind to our future self. When we come to the specific part of this process where we look at doing our calculations, all our ducks in a row, we've identified the sales levers, we've identified the individuals, we've identified the sales performance and what the commission schedules are. So now when we come to do our calculations, we can hit them in a single batch, and we've got all of the data that we need lined up, ready to go. And we can do it independently of having to run all of those other processes. And that hopefully reveals perhaps another benefit to this separation of concerns and breaking these processes up into component parts, is that any one of them can then potentially be rerun. And especially when we're getting towards the end of this chain of activities, we can rerun those quite easily without needing to rerun anything else. So for example, if a customer changes, the allocation of a customer changes from one sales team to another sales team, well, we'll need to run all subsequent stages after that because it's changed. But if we're talking about the decision as to which commission schedule should be assigned, well, we can just run that one process on its own. We don't need to go through all of the work that's been done up until that. So we've decided on the commission schedule, and this actually becomes a lot more relevant in more complex environments, in bigger organizations that sell tens, hundreds, thousands, possibly more products that are probably organized into a lot of different product hierarchies, product groups, product segments, product categories, each of which could be incentivized differently from a commercial strategy perspective. So again, this comes back to the idea that maybe there's a new product that we want to actively sell. And so it may be that the head of sales, the executive decide they're going to pay more commission on the new product as a way of incentivizing sales teams to focus on selling that new product more. Well, there'll be a commission schedule attached to that, and it will be different, potentially different to the commission schedule attached to another product or another product group. So this is where it really starts to become more beneficial. If you've got one product that you sell and everyone receives the same commission, well, that might be the case today. Maybe in the future, you'll be selling more products and you'll have more teams and you might have different structures. So there can be a benefit to doing it, but it will generally be more useful to organizations that have got more products and try to incentivize selling those different products in different ways. So now we've identified the commission schedule. We know what the table of percentages are. When we come to our calculations, we'll be able to look up based on the value of the sale. We'll be able to look up against the commission schedule and identify what the calculation is that we need to do. What's the percentage of that sale that will be attributed to the individual or to the team, if there are any splits that need to happen, and so on. But that really is this section in its entirety. We don't need to step back. So that is really this section in its entirety. It seems perhaps a little bit over-engineered, perhaps, in a way. But actually what we're doing is just putting a very specific set of boundaries around all of the logic related to this particular part of the calculation, or this particular part of sales commission calculation. And the reason is because calculation in itself has got a distinctly different set of logic and a different set of responsibilities. So everything we're doing up until now is preparing, and we're trying to make each of the components as contained and as logical and as easy to maintain over time as we possibly can.